First Contacts Challenge. Admiral James Henderson stood at the United Earth Defense Command's viewing window, watching the massive hologram of the alien vessel that had appeared in lunar orbit exactly 48 hours ago. The ship resembled a perfect dodecahedron, its crystalline surface reflecting starlight in mathematically precise patterns that human scientists were still trying to decode. "They call themselves the Xylaxians," General Maria Patel said, stepping beside him. "Their message was finally decoded an hour ago." She handed him a tablet, her usually steady hands trembling slightly. Henderson's eyes widened as he read. "They want to what?" "Challenge us to single combat," Patel confirmed. "Their champion against ours. Winner takes all." The Xylaxian message was painfully clear. Their undefeated warrior, KRYX, had conquered 57 civilizations in ritual combat. Each victory had been perfect, not a single wasted movement, not a single mistake. Their biology engineers had spent centuries creating what they called the perfect warrior, a being whose neural pathways processed combat moves faster than supercomputers. "And if we refuse?" Henderson asked, already knowing the answer. "Then they consider it a forfeit, and Earth becomes the 58th world under Xylaxian control." Patel pulled up another hologram, showing bio-readings of their champion that made Henderson's blood run cold. KRYX has never lost. Never even been hit. Their combat prediction algorithms are so advanced they can anticipate an opponent's moves before they even think of them. Henderson walked to the tactical table, spreading his hands across its surface. "So we need someone unpredictable. Someone whose moves can't be calculated because they don't follow any known pattern." "Exactly," Patel nodded. "We've run every combat specialist through the simulators. Special forces, martial artists, military champions, all of them follow patterns. Patterns that KRYX's systems would decode in seconds." "What about Isabella Rodriguez?" Patel's head snapped up. "Former Marine Force Recon Isabella Izzy Rodriguez? The one who got discharged for being too unpredictable?" "The very same," Henderson smiled. "The one who won the Pan-Asian conflict by challenging the enemy general to a dance-off while her team infiltrated their base. The one who stopped a terrorist attack using nothing but a rubber chicken and 3 cans of energy drink. Sir, with all due respect, Rodriguez is crazy. Unpredictable. Impossible to understand." Henderson's smile widened. "Exactly what we need. They found Izzy Rodriguez teaching parkour to senior citizens in a small town in New Mexico. She was standing on her head, explaining to an enthusiastic group of octogenarians how proper breathing could help them flip over walls, when the military transport landed. "Let me get this straight," Izzy said 30 minutes later, sitting in an impromptu briefing room. She had insisted on sitting cross-legged on the table rather than in a chair. "An alien empire wants to fight Earth's champion in single combat, and you want me because I'm unconventional," Henderson supplied. "Bats hit crazy is what my last commanding officer called it," Izzy grinned, pulling a yo-yo from her pocket and beginning an elaborate routine while maintaining eye contact. "But go on." As they explained the situation, Izzy's yo-yo tricks became increasingly complex, somehow incorporating quantum mechanical principles that shouldn't have been possible with a simple string and wheel. 3 scientists in the room had already started taking notes. "Their champion is perfect," Patel concluded. "Every move calculated, every response optimized." "Perfect is predictable," Izzy said, catching her yo-yo and suddenly becoming serious. "Perfect is boring. Perfect is beatable." She stood up, stretching like a cat. "When do we start?" "You'll need to train," Henderson began. "Nope," Izzy interrupted. "Training creates patterns. Patterns are predictable. I need to unlearn. I need chaos. I need." She paused dramatically, a rubber chicken, 16 different types of music from 16 different centuries, a unicycle, and access to your quantum physics lab. Henderson and Patel exchanged glances. Why the quantum physics lab? Patel finally asked. Because, Izzy said, already walking toward the door, if you're going to fight someone who predicts every move, the best move is one that even quantum mechanics says is impossible. Also, I like the way quantum particles dance. Gives me ideas. As they watched her cartwheel down the corridor, Henderson turned to Patel. Either we've just found Earth's salvation. Or we've doomed humanity by putting our fate in the hands of someone who thinks quantum physics is a dance partner, Patel finished. Both, Henderson decided. Definitely both. The Xylaxian observation probe hovered silently above Earth's most advanced military training facility, its sensors straining to make sense of what they were recording. Inside the facility's main chamber, Isabella Rodriguez was conducting what she called anti-training. The problem with combat, Izzy explained to her increasingly bewildered support team, while dancing the tango with a training dummy, is that everyone thinks it needs to make sense. The dummy, inexplicably, seemed to be leading. Dr. Raj Kumar, Earth's leading expert in xenobiology, watched as his carefully prepared combat analysis algorithms crashed for the third time that day. But how does this help you fight KRYX? He asked, gesturing at the scene before him. Izzy had transformed the state-of-the-art combat arena into what she called her chaos laboratory. Quantum physics equations floated in holographic displays next to Renaissance art. A saxophone played jazz fusion with traditional Mongolian throat singing. And in the center of it all, Izzy moved in patterns that seemed to actively defy the laws of physics. Look, she said, finally setting the dummy down with surprising gentleness. The Xylaxians built their champion using perfect logic. Every move calculated, every response optimized. But they made one crucial mistake. She pulled out her rubber chicken, which she'd named Schrödinger. They assumed combat follows rules. Above the facility, the Xylaxian probe's artificial intelligence experienced its first existential crisis. Lieutenant Commander Diane Wu, assigned as Izzy's tactical advisor, watched as her charge began what appeared to be a conversation with the rubber chicken about quantum entanglement. And this is helping because, Izzy grinned, right now, there are 17 Xylaxian probes trying to analyze my combat style. And do you know what they're reporting back? She pointed to a screen where the intercepted Xylaxian transmissions were being decoded. The latest message simply read, error, subject exhibits negative combat pattern coherence. Recommend recalibration of reality parameters. They're trying to find logic in chaos, Dr. Kumar realized, beginning to understand. It's like trying to find a stable pattern in random quantum fluctuations. Exactly. Izzy exclaimed, now teaching the training dummy to juggle. And the more they try to understand, the more their combat prediction algorithms will tie themselves in knots. The next week was filled with what Izzy called strategic unpredictability training. She convinced the quantum physics department to help her create what she termed Schrödinger's fighting style, a combat approach that existed in multiple states simultaneously until observed. She taught the Special Forces team assigned to her support staff how to use interpretive dance to explain tactical maneuvers. The Xylaxian probes began showing signs of electronic distress. On the Xylaxian command ship, High Commander VYX received increasingly concerning reports about the human champion's preparation methods. Explain again, they demanded of their chief combat analyst, what exactly is she doing? The analyst, a being engineered for perfect tactical analysis, seemed to be developing a nervous twitch. High Commander, yesterday she spent 6 hours teaching probability mathematics to a rubber chicken while performing what humans call breakdancing in a gravitational field she somehow made non-Euclidean. Our combat prediction systems have begun writing poetry in protest. Meanwhile, in the facility's cafeteria, Izzy was explaining her strategy to Admiral Henderson over what she insisted on calling quantum coffee, regular coffee cups she'd arranged in a pattern that mimicked electron orbital shells. The key, she said, moving cups in complex patterns, isn't to be unpredictable. It's to be anti-predictable. To do things so far outside the realm of combat logic that their perfect warrior's perfect brain will have no choice but to blue screen. Henderson watched as she demonstrated by performing a series of moves that looked like a cross between Tai Chi and someone trying to teach geometry to a cat. "And you're sure this will work?" "Admiral," Izzy smiled, "did you know that according to quantum mechanics, there's a non-zero probability that all the atoms in your body could spontaneously rearrange themselves 2 feet to the left?" "What does that have to do with anything?" "Absolutely nothing. And that's exactly the point." The day before the combat was scheduled to begin, the Xylaxian High Command received their final analysis of Earth's champion. The report consisted of a single line: "Warning, subject appears to be utilizing tactical randomness as a coherent strategy. Combat prediction reliability, error divide by 0. Dr. Kumar found Izzy in the quantum lab, teaching Schrödinger the chicken how to influence probability fields through interpretive dance. The transport leaves for the neutral combat zone in 12 hours, he reminded her. "Are you ready?" Izzy looked up from where she was simultaneously solving advanced calculus equations and performing what appeared to be a one-person version of the entire ballet Swan Lake. "Ready?" "Doc, I've spent the last month becoming the living embodiment of controlled chaos. I've taught quantum uncertainty how to throw a punch. I've made random number generators beg for mercy. But can you beat KRYX?" She smiled, and for a moment, the random movements stilled. "Here's the beautiful thing about chaos, document. In a universe governed by probability, the only certainty is uncertainty. And I've become very, very good at uncertainty." As if to emphasize her point, Schrödinger the rubber chicken chose that moment to defy gravity and float upward. Dr. Kumar decided not to ask how she'd managed that. The next morning, as Izzy boarded the transport that would take her to the combat zone, she carried with her an arsenal that had caused the security systems to crash 3 times, 1 rubber chicken, quantum entangled, 16 different musical instruments, none of which she knew how to play conventionally, a collection of probability equations written in interpretive dance notation, and what she claimed was a box containing Schrödinger's cat's singing career. Admiral Henderson watched her go, turned to General Patel, and said, "Either we've just created the greatest warrior in human history. Or we've weaponized absurdity," Patel finished. "Is there a difference?" The transport lifted off, carrying Earth's hopes in the form of a woman who had spent the last month teaching chaos theory how to throw a punch. Above, the Xylaxian probes finally gave up trying to analyze her and began playing jazz instead. The neutral combat zone, an abandoned space station orbiting Jupiter's moon Europa, had been transformed into what the Galactic Council considered a proper arena. The massive circular chamber gleamed with perfect geometric patterns, its walls lined with quantum-stabilized force fields to protect the gathered spectators. Representatives from 100 different species had come to witness what was being called the Logic War. Izzy arrived doing cartwheels out of her transport ship. The Galactic Council's chief observer, a being made primarily of crystalline thoughts and diplomatic protocols, watched with growing concern as Earth's champion proceeded to warm up by teaching her rubber chicken how to influence probability fields through interpersonal dance. "The combat will begin in 1 standard planetary rotation," the observer announced, their crystalline form flickering with uncertainty. "Both champions will be allowed to." "Quick question," Izzy interrupted, now standing on one hand while solving differential equations with her feet. "Does the station's artificial gravity field have to stay constant, or can I treat it more like a suggestion?" The observer consulted their rulebook, found nothing about gravity being optional, and developed their species' first recorded headache. In their preparation chamber, KRYX, the Xylaxian champion, reviewed the final analysis of their opponent. The combat prediction computers had given up producing actual predictions and were now generating abstract art. The last coherent report simply read, "Warning, subject demonstrates negative correlation with reality coefficients. Recommend updating definition of possible." KRYX, engineered to be the perfect warrior, felt something new: doubt. The combat chamber filled with spectators. The Galactic Council's representatives sat in their designated observation pods, their various sensory organs trained on the arena below. Among them, Dr. Kumar and Lieutenant Commander Wu watched as Izzy continued her preparation. "Is she teaching quantum physics to her shoelaces?" Wu asked. "No," Kumar replied, squinting. "I think she's teaching her shoelaces to teach quantum physics to her rubber chicken." The arena's main doors opened, and KRYX entered. The Xylaxian champion was a masterpiece of bioengineering, 3 meters of perfectly optimized combat potential, their crystalline exoskeleton shifting colors in mathematically precise patterns. Each movement was calculated to maximum efficiency, each step perfectly placed. Izzy entered doing the Macarena while reciting Sun Tzu's Art of War backwards in 17 different languages simultaneously. "Champions," the observer's voice resonated through the chamber, "approach the center." KRYX moved forward with perfect precision, their steps marking exact intervals on the floor. Izzy's approach involved what appeared to be a combination of moonwalking and non-Euclidean geometry. "The combat will proceed according to ancient traditions," the observer began. Question. Izzy raised her hand. "Do these ancient traditions account for the quantum uncertainty principle's effects on interpretive dance moves?" The observer spent several moments processing this, then continued as if they hadn't heard. "Combat will continue until one champion yields or is rendered incapable of continuing. No external weapons are permitted." Izzy raised her hand again. "Is Schrödinger considered external if he exists in a quantum superposition of multiple states?" The rubber chicken. "He prefers tactical probability modifier these days." In the observation pod, Dr. Kumar leaned over to Wu. "She's already won, you know. The fight hasn't even started." "Exactly. Look at KRYX's combat computer readouts." The Xylaxian champion's neural processors were indeed showing signs of strain, trying to calculate combat predictions for an opponent whose warm-up routine involved teaching rubber chickens quantum mechanics. "Champions, assume your combat stances," the observer commanded. KRYX moved into a position perfected through centuries of combat evolution, their form a study in lethal efficiency. Izzy appeared to be attempting to demonstrate string theory through interpersonal dance. "Begin." KRYX launched forward with perfect precision, their movement a blur of calculated strikes. Their combat computers had analyzed every known fighting style in the galaxy, could counter any possible attack. Izzy responded by doing something that made several physicists in the audience question their entire careers. The first strike missed completely as Izzy's body moved in ways that suggested she had a casual relationship with conventional geometry. KRYX's second attack, a perfectly executed quantum speed strike, somehow ended with them tangled in their own momentum as Izzy appeared to temporarily exist in multiple locations simultaneously. "Fascinating strategy you've got there," Izzy commented, now moving in patterns that made fractal mathematics look simple. "Very logical. Very precise. Very." She paused to dodge another strike by apparently briefly stepping into a different dimension, predictable. KRYX's combat computers were beginning to smoke slightly. "Your movements make no sense," the perfect warrior declared, launching another series of calculated attacks. "That's what I've been trying to tell everyone." Izzy beamed, evading the strikes through what appeared to be creative interpretation of cause and effect. "Did you know that if you approach combat from exactly 47 degrees northwest of logic, you can make probability theory cry?" In the observation pods, the gathered scientists had given up taking notes and were instead questioning their understanding of reality. The Galactic Council's physics experts were demanding to know how Izzy was apparently treating the laws of physics as helpful suggestions rather than absolute rules. "Combat must follow logical patterns." KRYX insisted, their perfect form beginning to show signs of stress as another precisely calculated attack sequence somehow resulted in them nearly hitting themselves. "Says who?" Izzy challenged, now appearing to demonstrate advanced calculus through interpersonal dance while simultaneously evading every strike. Did you ever ask chaos theory its opinion on the matter? The combat continued, but it was becoming increasingly clear that perfection had met its match in calculated randomness. For every perfect strike KRYX launched, Izzy had a response that seemed to bend reality itself. The perfect warrior's combat computers were now desperately trying to predict the unpredictable, attempting to find patterns in pure chaos. The thing about perfect, Izzy explained, dodging another strike by temporarily convincing local spacetime that she was actually a quantum probability wave, is that it's really just a limited understanding of imperfect. KRYX's processors were now running so hot their crystalline form was beginning to glow. This cannot be. Combat must follow rules. Rules? Izzy grinned, producing Schrödinger from what appeared to be a fold in reality itself. Let me tell you about rules. As the battle entered its final phase, the gathered representatives of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations watched in amazement as humanity's champion proceeded to defeat perfection itself with what appeared to be weaponized absurdity. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all, logic versus chaos. The combat arena had become something that defied description. Where KRYX moved with crystalline precision, Izzy flowed like liquid chaos, her movements creating patterns that seemed to actively mock the laws of physics. The perfect warrior's combat computers were now experiencing what could only be described as an existential crisis. Your style contradicts every known combat principle. KRYX declared, their perfect form showing signs of strain as another precisely calculated attack sequence dissolved into confusion. That's the point. Izzy replied cheerfully, now moving in ways that made theoretical physicists in the audience reach for strong drinks. Did you know that if you approach combat from exactly pi radians away from conventional logic, you can make causality get hiccups? The gathered representatives watched in fascination as Earth's champion proceeded to demonstrate exactly that. KRYX's attacks, each one a masterpiece of calculated precision, kept missing their target as Izzy appeared to treat spacetime more like a dance partner than a fundamental construct of reality. Combat is mathematics. KRYX insisted, their crystalline form vibrating with frustration. Combat is precision. Combat is jazz. Izzy countered, somehow managing to dodge a quantum speed strike by temporarily convincing local probability fields that she was actually a theoretical concept. It's improvisation. It's the space between the notes. In the observation pod, Dr. Kumar was frantically trying to explain to a group of alien scientists how Izzy's movements weren't actually breaking the laws of physics, they were just, creatively reinterpreting them. Lieutenant Commander Wu had given up trying to take notes and was instead contemplating a career change to something more predictable, like chaos theory. The perfect warrior's combat computers were now producing error messages in languages that hadn't been invented yet. Each attack, calculated to microsecond precision, somehow ended up tangled in its own logic as Izzy responded with movements that suggested she had a casual relationship with causality itself. The thing about perfect, Izzy explained, now apparently teaching Schrödinger how to influence probability fields through interpretive dance mid-combat, is that it's really just chaos that's afraid to let loose and have fun. Victory in madness. The final moments of the combat were approaching, and the universe held its breath. KRYX, the perfect warrior, the product of centuries of combat evolution, was facing something they had never encountered before, an opponent who treated logic as optional and probability as a suggestion. Your strategy cannot work. KRYX declared, launching what should have been an unstoppable combination of strikes. It defies all combat logic. Exactly. Izzy beamed, avoiding the entire sequence by temporarily existing in a quantum superposition of states. That's what makes it unstoppable. You can't predict what doesn't make sense. The perfect warrior's crystalline form was now showing distinct signs of stress, their combat computers desperately trying to calculate patterns in pure chaos. Each perfect move was met with something that made game theory throw up its hands in defeat. And then, in a moment that would be debated in scientific circles for centuries to come, Izzy Rodriguez did something that broke perfection itself. With Schrödinger the rubber chicken providing what she called quantum moral support, she executed a move that simultaneously existed in all possible states until observed, effectively creating a combat Schrödinger's cat scenario. KRYX's combat computers, trying to predict every possible outcome simultaneously, finally encountered the mathematical equivalent of dividing by zero. The perfect warrior, faced with pure, weaponized absurdity, experienced something entirely new, complete and utter computational shutdown. How? KRYX managed to ask as their perfect form stumbled, combat systems crashing under the weight of trying to process the unprocessable. How did you defeat perfection? Izzy helped her fallen opponent up, grinning. Because perfection is predictable. Humanity. We're beautifully, wonderfully imperfect. And that makes us stronger than any perfect system. The combat was over. Earth's champion, armed with nothing but a rubber chicken and an understanding of how to weaponize absurdity, had defeated the galaxy's perfect warrior. The Galactic Council's observer, still trying to process exactly what they had witnessed, officially declared Izzy Rodriguez the victor. In the aftermath, as representatives from 100 worlds tried to make sense of what they had just witnessed, Admiral Henderson approached Izzy, who was teaching Schrödinger and a group of alien scientists how to dance the quantum waltz. You just saved Earth by turning combat into performance art, he said, shaking his head in amazement. No, Izzy corrected, still dancing. I saved Earth by being human. We're the species that looked at the impossible and said, watch this. We're the ones who turn chaos into art and make uncertainty our ally. That's our real strength. The Xylaxian Empire, faced with their first defeat in centuries, did something unexpected, they laughed. Their perfect society, built on perfect logic and perfect order, had encountered something that all their calculations had failed to account for, the beautiful unpredictability of the human spirit. As the gathered species departed the combat zone, many were overheard discussing a new theory, that perhaps the true path to advancement in the universe wasn't through perfect order, but through embracing the chaos that made life interesting. Some even requested copies of Schrödinger's quantum dance tutorials. And Izzy Rodriguez? She went back to teaching parkour to senior citizens, occasionally giving lectures at the galaxy's most prestigious universities on what she called the mathematics of nonsense. The rubber chicken became a legendary artifact, studied by combat theorists who never quite managed to understand how it had helped defeat perfection itself. In the end, humanity had proven something fundamental about the universe, that in a cosmos governed by uncertainty principles and quantum mechanics, sometimes the most logical approach was to abandon logic altogether and dance with chaos itself. The stars, it seemed, had been waiting for someone to teach them how to dance. And humanity, in all its beautiful imperfection, had finally shown them how.